Breaking news from Sakir. Ferrari is going all in at the 2025 Bahrain GP, and while Charles Leclerc is dropping hints, Hamilton is looking increasingly uncomfortable. But did the upgrades really work? Ferrari has arrived at the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix with a move that could mark a turning point in its season. The Italian team, under pressure from disappointing results in the first 3 races, has implemented its first major package of updates to the SF25. And it's not just a simple upgrade. It's a strategic redesign of key areas of the car that seeks to address the root causes of the structural issues that have doomed its performance. The core of these improvements lies in the car's floor. Ferrari has redesigned the so-called floor fences, vertical structures that modify how air flows under the car. They have also adjusted the shape of the floor body and its edges, with a specific aim of channeling aerodynamic flow to the rear diffuser more efficiently. The reason? Combating the instability that has made the car unpredictable, especially in Hamilton's hands. But the intervention doesn't stop there. The diffuser has been redesigned to work in sync with floor changes, and an additional winglet has been incorporated into the rear wing pillar. This part, although small, could be key to improving the car's overall efficiency in high-speed corners, an area where Ferrari has lost significantly to McLaren and Red Bull. All this effort responds to an urgent need. Ferrari is 4th in the Constructors' Championship, 76 points behind McLaren. This isn't just a technical step. It's a statement. Ferrari isn't giving up yet. But there's a nuance that can't be ignored. These improvements have a hidden agenda: to allow the SF25 to run at a lower height without risking a regulatory penalty. After Hamilton's disqualification in China due to excessive wear on the plank, Ferrari understood it had to find a way to maximize performance without crossing the line. And this update is essentially a technical response to a regulatory issue. Furthermore, the decision to implement this package in Bahrain wasn't improvised. Although many see it as a reaction to the results crisis, those within the team assure us that it was already planned. However, the timing still raises questions. Was it external pressure? Was it Hamilton who forced this move forward? Or did Ferrari simply not afford to wait any longer? What is clear is that this improvement is not symbolic. It is the first major shot in a war to save the season. If these pieces don't work, Ferrari could lose not only the championship, but also control of its own narrative. Are these changes up to what is needed to compete with McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes? Or are they simply cosmetic changes for a car that is structurally limited? Lewis Hamilton has been one of the most vocal drivers regarding the SF25 shortcomings since the start of the 2025 season. At the Japanese Grand Prix, Hamilton didn't hesitate to point out that something wasn't working as it should with his car, describing a deficit in its performance. This statement left everyone in the paddock wondering if the Briton was targeting a specific issue with the car, something he claimed was making him feel he couldn't get the most out of its performance. After that Grand Prix, expectations grew considerably that the improvements Ferrari had promised for Bahrain would resolve those issues. Hamilton, who seemed to have lost confidence in the car, made it clear that he hoped the new updates would be the solution. In his own words, "We've got new floors this weekend, so it should be gone." This statement, however, wasn't as emphatic when the weekend in Bahrain arrived. At the press conference before the Bahrain GP, Hamilton's tone changed. Far from being as optimistic as he had been previously, he adopted a much more cautious and reserved stance. "Don't expect anything at all, just watch and enjoy. We're working as hard as we can, that's all I can say," he remarked with a much more measured demeanor. This change in his body and verbal language sparked speculation in the paddock as to whether Ferrari had asked him to moderate his comments or if he had reached a non-verbal agreement with the team to soften the public criticism. This shift in Hamilton's attitude further fueled speculation about internal tensions within the team. The relationship between drivers and the team is always delicate, but in this case, the contrast between what Hamilton had previously said and what he was now willing to communicate seemed to indicate a change of direction, possibly driven by internal pressure from Ferrari or the need to maintain a cohesive image with the public. However, after the first Friday practice sessions in Bahrain, Hamilton showed a slight sign of optimism. During interviews, he mentioned that the improvements are definitely working and thanked the team for their hard work. Hamilton was emphatic in pointing out that implementing the modifications was not easy. "It's good to see we're making strides, we're trying to get more out of it," he commented. However, despite this optimism, his practice results were not as encouraging. He finished the second session in 8th place, 1 second off Oscar Piastri's fastest lap, suggesting that the improvements were still not enough to close the gap to the leaders. Despite this change in tone and his willingness to be more reserved about the SF25's issues, Hamilton's on-track performance made it clear that the improvements were not a panacea. While progress was acknowledged, the gaps to the McLaren and Red Bull cars remained stark. The results from the practice sessions indicated that, although Ferrari had made progress, there was still much to do to reach the level of its strongest competitors. This more cautious approach on Hamilton's part not only reflects the complexity of Ferrari's situation but also the internal pressure the team is likely feeling. Was Hamilton more concerned about the team's expectations, or was he simply aware that the improvements, while useful, are still not enough to compete with the F1 giants? While Lewis Hamilton experimented with a mixture of cautious optimism and contained frustration, Charles Leclerc took a much more direct and realistic approach to Ferrari's situation. Amid hopes that the improvements introduced for the Bahrain Grand Prix could close the gap on the strongest competitors, Leclerc did not hide his doubts about the true impact of these updates. In an interview with Belgian journalist Gaëtan Vigneron, Leclerc expressed himself clearly and precisely, "We have some new parts on the car, so I hope they will help us close the gap to the McLarens and Max. After that, I'm not sure it will take us to their level, but it will help us push them a little harder in the race." These words not only reflect brutal realism but also hint at a slight disappointment. Leclerc was not prepared to pin all his hopes on updates that, while important, still did not guarantee a complete transformation of the car's performance. For him, the immediate goal wasn't to reach the level of McLaren or Red Bull, but simply to be more competitive in the fight for the podium. As the practice sessions in Bahrain progressed, Leclerc was even more forceful in his analysis. During the interviews following the first day of practice, the Monégasque driver was blunt. "We're simply not fast enough. When we look at McLaren, they're on another planet right now. It's annoying, but it is what it is. In fact, it motivates me to try to close that gap as soon as possible, but they're incredibly fast." These words underscore the disconnect Ferrari still faces with the leading teams. McLaren, which has demonstrated overwhelming speed, appears to be a step ahead, and Leclerc, try as he might, knows it won't be easy to overcome that gap in the short term. Despite Ferrari introducing a package of updates aimed at improving the SF25 stability, the disparity in the car's pace is something Leclerc couldn't ignore. Leclerc's comment about McLaren being another planet highlights the magnitude of the task facing Ferrari. It's not just a matter of improving in some areas, but of catching up with a team that, for the moment, appears to have a considerable hold in terms of performance. The most interesting thing about Leclerc's statements is that, despite his obvious frustration, he doesn't appear defeated. Rather, there is a palpable motivation behind his words. Although Ferrari isn't yet at the level of McLaren or Red Bull, Leclerc's focus is on minimizing the gap and striving for the best possible results under the current circumstances. While the task isn't easy, the Monégasque remains motivated by the possibility of improvement, even if the hope of a radical change still seems distant. This contrast between Hamilton and Leclerc regarding their reactions to Ferrari's improvements is revealing. While Hamilton, though optimistic, is cautious and somewhat skeptical, Leclerc is much more explicit about the difficulties Ferrari faces. For him, the reality is that, while the updates are a step in the right direction, there is still a long way to go. And while the motivation is there, the gap with the Formula One leaders remains a difficult mountain to climb. The impact of the improvements Ferrari has introduced for the Bahrain Grand Prix goes far beyond what can happen in a single race. At this point in the 2025 season, Ferrari is in a delicate position in the Constructors' Championship. They currently sit in fourth place, 76 points behind McLaren, who sits at the top. This disparity not only reflects a glaring performance gap but also the lack of consistency that has characterized Ferrari since the start of the season. While the Maranello team has shown glimpses of its potential, such as Leclerc's fourth place in Japan and Hamilton's sprint race victory in China, those results are insufficient to challenge for the Constructors' title at this time. The improvements implemented for Bahrain could be a crucial first step, but the truth is that Ferrari is in a race against time. Time to close this gap with McLaren and Red Bull is rapidly running out, and the competition not only remains strong but also continues to develop its own cars. Ferrari needs these advances, but it also needs these improvements to be sufficient to tangibly close the gap between the two teams. Otherwise, the situation could become even more complicated. While the modifications to the SF25 point to a significant improvement, the performance gap seen in early practice in Bahrain suggests that, although the car has made a step forward, it is not fast enough to consistently challenge McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes for the podium. But it's not just the car's performance that's at stake. If Ferrari fails to consistently improve in the upcoming races, the team could face a serious dilemma. Should it continue to invest resources in the SF25, knowing that the improvements might not be enough, or should it redirect its attention to developing the car for 2026? With the new regulations coming into effect in 2026, Ferrari could be tempted to start turning its attention to the future, especially if the 2025 season remains one of rebuilding rather than one of title aspirations. The challenge also lies in how Ferrari manages its resources. Every little bit of progress counts, and as Deputy Team Principal Jerome D'Ambrosio mentioned, every 0.01 seconds gained in performance is a step forward. However, this isn't just about gaining those fractions of a second on the track, but also about how Ferrari manages its long-term development. While the pressure to improve quickly is immense, the temptation to make radical or hasty changes could lead to decisions that aren't helpful in the long run. Ferrari's strategy must be clear: maintain gradual but steady development without losing focus on the long-term goal. Furthermore, the development of the SF25 and the improvements implemented so far also have a direct impact on team morale. Hamilton's comments, which shifted from cautious optimism to a more reserved attitude, coupled with Leclerc's doubts about the car's ability to catch McLaren, reflect that the team is under constant pressure. Expectations are high, but the reality on the track remains complex. If Ferrari fails to close the gap to the leaders, internal team morale could be affected, which could impact overall performance for the remainder of the season. In the long term, Ferrari will have to evaluate its positioning in the championship, especially considering that McLaren continues to perform superiorly, and Red Bull, with Max Verstappen at the helm, remains the favorite to win the Constructors' title. Ferrari not only faces a technical challenge, but also a mental and strategic struggle. They will have to decide whether to continue investing all their resources for a season that seems increasingly distant from titles, or whether to start thinking about their strategy for 2026, which could be their next big opportunity with the new regulations. The key for Ferrari in the coming weeks will be to find consistency and improve with each race. They cannot afford another mistake like the one that occurred in Australia, where the car was nowhere near its best due to altitude and wear issues. If they fail to achieve this, the decisions about how to invest their time and resources as the end of the 2025 season approaches could mark a turning point in the team's recent history. The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix will be a turning point in Ferrari's season, but the question isn't just how the car performs on track, but whether these improvements are enough to truly change the course of the championship. Ferrari, which has been caught between the frustration of not meeting expectations and the pressure to improve quickly, now has a package of updates that could give it the necessary boost to close the gap with the leading teams. However, the reality in Bahrain is that, although improvements are being seen, they are not enough to ensure the SF25 can compete on equal terms with McLaren or Red Bull. Hamilton and Leclerc's words perfectly reflect the internal struggle within the team. While Hamilton is cautious, but confident that the improvements are working, Leclerc is faced with the harsh reality that Ferrari is still far from where it should be. The performance of both drivers reflects the tensions within a team that, despite having the necessary talent, continues to struggle with the structural and design limitations of its car. Ferrari needs more than just a package of updates. It needs a complete transformation in its development approach, one that will allow it to be competitive over the long term, not just in certain races. While the improvements brought to Bahrain are a step in the right direction, the team must continue developing the SF25 while preparing for the future. As the season progresses, Ferrari's ability to adapt and evolve will be constantly tested, and the decisions they make now could determine whether they have a real chance of fighting for the Constructors' title or whether, instead, they will begin preparing their project for 2026. The 2025 season is far from a failure, but the next few races will be crucial in determining whether Ferrari can overcome its technical difficulties and return to a competitive path. What is clear is that time is running out. If they fail to improve their consistency and pace, they could lose their chance of being a real threat in the championship fight this year. But all is not lost. Ferrari has the ability to make up ground if the updates continue to bear fruit and if they manage to maximize the potential of their car. As we approach the end of this analysis, it's essential to reflect on the future of the team. Ferrari must have a clear strategy and adapt quickly to the challenges this season presents, without losing sight of the long-term objective. The coming months will be key to determining whether this season is an opportunity to rebuild or if it's time to redirect their focus to the future. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Do you think Ferrari can close the gap on McLaren and Red Bull, or is it already too late to challenge for the 2025 title? Leave your opinion in the comments, because your thoughts are essential to this conversation. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell to follow the season's developments and not miss the latest news from Ferrari and the entire F1 world. Share this video with other F1 fans because the 2025 season is far from over, and every race could be the key to changing everything.